Thank you for joining us today for the fourth and final webinar in our series on parliamentary procedure for libraries. Today's session is Voting Plus. This webinar is being recorded. Please keep your line muted during the presentation. If you have a question, please share it via chat and I will relay it to our presenter as appropriate. As soon as today's recording is available, I will share it with all of you along with the materials from the first 3 webinars, along with an evaluation form. We will appreciate your feedback. One last time, our presenter is professional registered parliamentarian Pat Raymond. The floor is yours, Pat.
Thank you very much, Zach. I'm looking forward to this, and let me see if I can get my screen shared. There we go. Okay. Okay, everybody should see my screen now that says Voting Plus. We'll be spending a lot of time on voting, but I had a couple other things I wanted to throw in since we are meeting for the last time today. So here we go. When we're talking about voting, the first thing we want to think about is what vote is required for the particular motion or matter that we are discussing. Now, as you remember from previous times, we said we must have a quorum present in order to conduct a vote. And you all remember what a quorum is. That's a minimum of the number of people that must be, or the number of members specifically, who must be present in order for you to conduct valid business. So what vote is required? Well, usually majority. And you recall from previous sessions too, that we define majority as more than half. Not one more than half necessarily, but more than half. And the official definition, according to Roberts, is more than half of those votes cast by members eligible to vote at a regular or properly called meeting. That's the official one. And most motions that we encounter require a majority vote to be adopted. Now, elections are special cases, and there'll be a provision in the bylaws to determine, or at least there should be, to determine what vote is required for that. The majority is preferred by Roberts because you want to have as many people, or at least the majority of the people, be behind the person who is going to be your leader. So majority is preferred. But if you don't get a majority on that first ballot that you have, the vote would be retaken until one of the candidates does have a majority. And despite popular opinion, no candidate should be dropped from the ballot at this when you re-vote, unless of course you've got something in your bylaws that says that's the way you do it. But if you don't have anything in your bylaws and you're going by Roberts, you would leave everybody on the ballot and then reballot. Now, this is assuming more than 2 candidates, because if you have just 2 candidates, unless there's a tie, you're going to have one of them will have a majority. But this is assuming more than 2. Now, the other possibility for instead of majority would be plurality. Some bylaws say that plurality elects, and that just means whoever gets the most votes. If you were around here in Minnesota, an adult in 1999, you may remember the governor's race that we had that year. Jesse Ventura received 37% of the vote. Norm Coleman received 34% of the vote. And Skip Humphrey received 28% of the vote. Close as that was. And Jesse Ventura was our governor for 4 years. You may remember that. And that was because plurality elects in Minnesota for governor. Now, another possibility is 2/3. I mean, there are other possibilities too, but 2/3 is the other common one. Please note the terminology. It is not 2/3 majority. When you think about it, that's an oxymoron, because we know what majority means. We just talked about that. That was more than half. And then we've got 2/3, which is more than that. So 2/3 majority doesn't mean anything, but we hear it a lot. So it should just be 2/3. Again, supermajority is not correct either. So let's try not to use that term as well. So 2/3 means you have twice as many votes in favor as there are opposed. In other words, a 2-to-1 ratio. Now, we don't use 2/3 votes very often, but if we're going to do something like limit or extend limit of debate, or if we're going to suspend a parliamentary rule so that we can do something else right at this minute, or usually when you amend bylaws, all of those motions would take a 2/3 vote. That's when 2/3 shows up. Sometimes a motion will require or have as an alternative to 2/3 a majority of the entire membership. Now that includes the people who are not present as well. And that can be an alternative to 2/3 depending on the situation. So how do you calculate the vote? The wording of whatever rule you're looking at makes a huge difference sometimes. So on how you calculate the vote. Now, I don't mean just how you count it, but I mean how you figure out if you've got a majority or 2/3 or what have you. It can be based on the members who are present and voting. And that is the most common. And if we say majority, that's what we mean, present and voting. But sometimes the rules will say a majority of those present. And you want to clean that up if you've got that in your bylaws, because that will show you in a minute with an example that can get you in trouble. Or sometimes it'll be a majority of the entire membership. And that's a larger threshold, of course. That's when you need to do something that is a little above and beyond the normal scope of things. So let's take an example. Let's say your organization has 200 members. 100 of them come to your meeting. There's a motion and it's voted on, but only 98 people out of the 100 who were there vote. Of those 98, 50 vote in favor, 48 are opposed, and 2, for whatever reason, don't vote. We say they abstain, just so that it all adds up to 100. Now let's see what happens. If the motion passes by a majority, if that's all you need is a majority, that means present and voting automatically. You would need to have 50 votes in order to get that motion to pass. And sure enough, we did get 50 votes. There were 50 in favor. So therefore, this motion would pass if all you needed was a majority. Let's say instead it says you need a majority of those present. Well, there are 100 that are present. A majority of 100 is 51. So would this motion pass? No, it comes up short 1. So that motion would fail if it says you needed a majority of those present. How about a majority of the entire membership? Well, the entire membership is 200. A majority of that would be 101. No way that would pass because you don't even have that many people at the meeting. So that one is a goner also. So you see there is a distinct difference in the outcome of voting if you don't have the basis correct, if you don't have the basis that you want. Now, sometimes you do want to have a motion that requires a majority of the entire membership. But generally speaking, a majority of those present and voting will cover most situations. What about abstentions? Now that means an abstention means that somebody just chooses not to vote. And it can be for any reason whatsoever. We don't bother about it. So members do have the right to vote unless they are suspended due to disciplinary reasons. and you probably don't run into that very often. I don't. People may vote, though, even if their dues are not up to date. And that's a little known fact. Unless you have something in your bylaws that say members must be current in their dues before they can vote. But in general, if someone is just kind of slow to pay their dues, they still get to vote. And of course, no one can be compelled to vote. So some people choose to abstain. Now, some will abstain because they know they have a conflict of interest. Now, by a conflict of interest, I mean that they'll have a financial interest not common to other members. For instance, perhaps they are owner or married to the owner of a construction company that's involved in the motion because they've submitted a bid for something, and it would be a good idea for the person to abstain from voting. So some will abstain because of conflict of interest, but no one can be compelled to abstain unless the governing documents say so. And I have seen some governing documents that say a person with a conflict may not vote. So. All right. Oh, there we go. I was having trouble getting it to advance. Got it now. Abstentions, though, are never called for by the chair, and they're not listed in the minutes unless someone requests that they be listed in the minutes as having abstained. Like this example I just gave you with the construction company, that person would say, would you please have the minutes reflect that I abstained? And that would be an exception. You could put that in, and that would be good. All right, now what happens if the vote is tied? Well, the motion is lost because it did not receive a majority, or perhaps they needed 2/3 in the affirmative. Now, except for which motion? Remember last time we talked about a special motion that that didn't get lost when the vote was tied. Do you remember what that one was? Okay, you've got it. Appeal from the decision of the chair. Shall the decision of the chair be upheld? And if it's a tie vote, the answer is yes, the decision of the chair is upheld. So it's not lost in the same sense that this would be. So just see if you remember that. Okay, what does the chair do here in a case of a tie? If it's a ballot vote, just in general, now this is not in case of a tie, but in general, when there is a ballot vote, the chair may vote, but at the same time as the assembly. The chair doesn't wait to see what the outcome is and then cast a ballot. The chair needs to cast a ballot at the same time as everybody else does if the chair chooses to vote. But the chair may vote when that vote makes a difference. Usually we hear to break a tie. Well, that's only part of it. To make or break a tie, or achieve 2/3 if that is what is required of that vote. So it's really more complete to say the chair votes or may vote when his or her vote makes a difference. And again, the chair is not compelled to vote. Okay, so if the vote is tied, the chair could vote in favor and to make it pass. If the motion passes by one vote, the chair could vote against it to make a tie, and then the motion would fail. So that's what we mean to make a tie. If the motion passes by one vote, the chair could vote against it, and then it would fail. Okay, any questions so far? All righty. So, oh yeah, what's that?
Quick one. What then is a supermajority, and does it have any place in our parliamentary procedures?
I don't know what a supermajority is, and no, it does not have a place in our parliamentary procedure. Thank you for clarifying that, or asking that clarifying question. Yeah, I think on the news they use it if they need, well, maybe 60%. I know the Senate sometimes needs 60% for some of their votes, and I think that might be what they refer to. But your point is taken, is that it's meaningless. Yeah, basically. So thank you for that question. Okay. All right. Unanimous consent. What is that? Well, that's a process that you can go through for routine or not non-controversial matters. It saves time. Why not? It has the same effect as voting, but it's a much quicker process. So the chair would, maybe someone has made a motion, and the chair says, is there any objection to that motion, to doing whatever that motion says? And you pause to give people a chance to respond. And since I hear no objection, we will go ahead and do that, so that it passes a motion without having to go through the voting process. Another way of saying it would be, the chair would say, without objection, we will go ahead and do that. But you do have to hesitate a little bit and give someone a chance to object, because this is democracy. So if somebody objects, then the motion is processed in the usual way. The chair repeats it, it's debated, and voted on. If it's a debatable motion, of course, and then it's voted on. Okay. So common methods of voting. No matter what is chosen as a method, the chair has to be sure to give clear directions, because everybody needs to know what's being voted on and what it is they need to do or say in order to express their opinion. So chair has to be sure to give directions. For instance, those opposed, that's not a direction. Those opposed, raise their right hand or jump up and down or whatever it is the chair wants you to do. But you don't just say those opposed, for an example. All right. Now, the most common is the voice vote. And we have talked about this when we had our 6 steps of the motion, how to process a motion. That was a voice vote, is what we went through. So it is the most common method, and it's for motions that require a majority vote. And that's most of them. If they require a 2/3 vote, you don't use a voice vote. We'll talk about what it is you do use, but not this one. So as you know, the chair would say, the question is on the adoption of the motion to do whatever. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. And then the ayes or noes have it, the motion is adopted or lost, and we will go ahead and do that. And that's just straight from what we did before with the steps in handling a motion. So this is the most common. You will notice that as we go through these, they go from the very simple, the very easy, the very short period of time, very quick, to methods that are a little more complicated and take a little bit longer. So that's why we kind of start with the shortest, easiest one first, because that's the one most likely to use. But as we get up the ladder, so to speak, some of them may need permission of the assembly to be used. Well, you'll see, but they get more complicated as we go along. Okay, show of hands is another good one. This one is useful in small groups, 5, 8, 10, maybe even 12. The thing with voice votes, and I think we have all done this or at least seen it done. If you have a small group and the chair asks those in favor say aye, well, those people will just use their regular voice and say aye. But when you can tell that when it's going to be close, you know what the no's do? They yell. Those opposed say no, no, And so if you're just using your ears to figure out which side has it, who has the more, which side has the more votes, your ears will deceive you and it won't be right. So because of human nature, showing hands, raising hands works really better for a small group. And you can see it's easy to judge. It's much more accurate in that case. So in a small group, the chair can say the question is on the adoption of the motion to do such and such. Those in favor, raise your hand. You can specify the right hand if you want. Lower them. Those opposed, raise your hand. Lower them. Oops, the rest here. The affirmative or negative has it. The motion is adopted or lost, and we will. So the same process, but just different directions for that part as to what do you do to indicate your choice. Now, I want to put in voting cards here. Voting cards are mentioned in Roberts, but it's kind of a new thing. The show of hands useful for small group. This is useful in a convention or a large meeting. It's very much like show of hands, but it's showing a brightly colored index card or something like that would be given to the voting delegates when they register. And the beauty of this is that only voting delegates get it. So if you have guests and so forth in the room, and you don't know who everybody is, particularly in a large group, this ensures that only voting delegates are doing the voting. So they are raised when the chair calls for a vote. So instead of saying those in favor, raise your hand, the chair will say those in favor, raise your voting card. And that's much easier to see, a group of bright yellow cards or red cards or magenta or whatever color they happen to be. That's easier to see than people's hands, because they get a little lost. I don't know if you've been up front in a large meeting in a convention, but as parliamentarian, I get to sit next to the chair, which is fun. But if you're on a stage and you've got hundreds of people out there always are bright lights shining right in your eyes. They put the spotlights on the head table, and it can be very difficult to see what's out there. So anything that can help the chair to visualize what the vote is very helpful. All right. Now, the third one is the rising vote. Now, this is not a counted vote, but just a rising vote. And this is where you need, this is what you need when you have a 2/3 vote required. You need a visual. Something that you can hear is not sufficient to judge if you've got twice as many in favor as opposed. So we always use a rising vote for 2/3 vote. If you've got a small group, you can do the show of hands for this as well. But when the chair is unclear of the result of a voice vote, the chair can just ask, let's retake this as a rising vote. Another member may call out division. We didn't talk about that one before. It's a motion, but it doesn't require a second or a vote or any of that stuff. It just is a demand, and it's strong. It's a demand from a member to retake the vote in a different way because he or she does not agree with the announcement by the chair of which side won. And again, going back to that big room where you have people up front on the stage trying to figure out what's going on down on the main level, and the acoustics being awkward in many times. The chair may hear it one way, but somebody in the middle or the back may hear it another way. And so this is a way to make sure it's accurate. Yes, Zach.
Anne is asking if someone actually counts the cards if using voting cards.
Sometimes, but not yet. Not in our example. When you had the like the show of hands and those in favor, raise your voting cards. No, that's not counted. That's just an eyeball, making a judgment. But they can be counted in step number 4. We're just on 3 right now, but you would count it in the next go round here.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Again, counting takes a lot of time, and you don't want to start doing that if you don't really need to. So if a member calls division, then the vote needs to be retaken immediately in a different method. So division would be used when the voice vote was used. And so it's retaken, and it would be retaken as a rising vote, not counted necessarily, just a rising vote. Okay, so the chair would say the question is on the adoption of the motion to do whatever. Those in favor, please rise. And this, if you are able, is something I add. That is not in Roberts anywhere that I've seen. But I know for folks that are disabled, rising is not a possibility. So we certainly want them to be included in the vote, and in groups where this, such folks are present, they are, we say this, and then they can raise their hand, or if they have a voting card, raise that, whatever. But we certainly do want to include all folks who are eligible to vote. Okay, so after those in favor, please rise if you are able, and then the chair looks it over. Be seated. Those opposed, please rise if you're able. Be seated. The affirmative or negative has it. The motion is adopted or lost, and we will. Again, this is just using eyesight as your gauge for judging which side has it. Okay, here we come to the counting vote. You can have a counting rising vote, and this may be initiated by the chair. That is, the chair can just proclaim, we are going to take this as a counted rising vote because it was so close. Or the assembly can suggest it by means of making a motion. All right. Somewhere I have a motion. Okay, that's not yet. All right, so we'll go back. May be initiated by the chair, vote of the assembly, after a motion is made to do so. And I've shown this in another one. The assembly, someone would say, I move to retake this vote as a counted vote. It's a second, it is not debatable. It would require a majority vote, and then you go ahead and do it. So because you are taking up a lot of the time of the assembly, you're asking their permission. The chair can authorize it, or if somebody else wants to authorize it, one of the membership, then you have to ask the permission of the assembly. And if if you have a sizable group, it's a good idea for the chair to appoint tellers to assist in the counting. And the chair would then say, the question is on the adoption of the motion to do such and such. Those in favor, please rise if you are able, and stay standing until you are counted. So the tellers would be down on the floor counting by rows or however they want to do it. And then they would signal to the group, like to one row at a time, you may be seated. And they're probably writing down on a little Post-it note or something how many were in that row, or however they decide to do it. And then the tellers report the total to the chair in this case, and the chair then makes the determination which side has won. Now the votes will be given on both sides. In a case of a counted vote, it'll be so many people in favor, so many people against. And that needs to go into the minutes. Whenever there is a counted vote, the secretary should include that in the minutes. Okay, now the biggie, the ballot. This is used for most elections and for secret votes. Anytime you want to have, if you've got something controversial and that you don't want everybody to know how you're voting, then you can ask for a ballot vote. And sometimes you'll have this in your bylaws that the election should be done by ballot. But for other votes, a member may say, I move that when the vote is taken, it be taken by ballot. And that motion can be made while the debate is going on, you would stop and process this motion. Should we take this by ballot? And then if it passes, you keep going with your debate on the motion. This does not stop debate in its tracks and mean that you have to take the ballot vote right now. It means that when the vote is taken, later on when we're done debating, then we want it to be taken by ballot. So it does not cut off debate at this point. Okay, and that motion would take a second. It is not debatable, and it takes a majority vote. Now, as I said before, ballots are usually specified in the bylaws for elections. However, Roberts encourages you to have in there that if there is only one candidate for an office, that person be declared elected by acclamation. So you don't have to go through the ballot process. Now, again, it depends on the wording in your bylaws, just like almost everything else. But this is a good idea to have a person elected by acclamation. Saves you time. You know what the outcome is going to be anyway. And so you might as well. Now, when there is a ballot election, the chair will want to have tellers again. And the tellers are responsible for distributing the ballots to the people who are eligible to vote. They will collect the ballots when they're done, and they will tally them and give a report. So after all the work is done, and the business of the meeting can just keep going while the tellers are doing their counting, it's okay. The tellers will tell you how many votes were cast, the total votes cast. Remember in our example, we said there were 98 votes cast. Well, you want to know how many votes are cast because you need to determine that is going to be your baseline number for determining what a majority is how many votes were cast. So you need that information. You can tell how many illegal ballots there are. Usually there are not very many or any. And that's if someone has voted for Mickey Mouse, or if somebody has voted for two people when they're only supposed to vote for one, that's an illegal ballot. If somebody has accidentally or whatever gotten two ballots when they should have only gotten one, and they fill them both out, fold them up together, that is one illegal ballot, and that's not counted. And then the vote needed for election, it might just be plurality, or it might be majority. And if it's majority, then the tellers would tell how many votes that would be. So if it's the total votes are 100, then majority would be 51. And then the votes for each candidate, going from the highest to the lowest. And now that's all they do. I mean, that's a huge thing, but I mean, that's as far as they go. The full report, by the way, goes into the minutes. I know nobody likes to have it advertised that they did not win or that they only got 25 votes or whatever, but transparency is more important than people's feelings on this. So please put everything into the minutes, and please tell everybody in the membership how many votes everybody got. It's the healthy thing to do. So the report goes into the minutes, and I got this backwards. The chair rereads the teller's report, and then the chair is the one who declares the winners. So the tellers do not get up and say, okay, Johnny got 75 votes and Mary Smith got 38, and therefore Johnny is the winner. That part is left to the president to declare. Okay, everybody with me? Okay, there are many ways to vote. Here are a couple more others. Cumulative voting, hard to say, and we don't see this very often, but members are given so many votes to cast. For instance, you're electing maybe a board of directors, and you have everyone may vote for 3, and you can vote for 3 different people, give them each 1 vote, or you can do more of a bullet vote and give all 3 to just one person. And that's called cumulative voting. Roll call, I have it as less common, but it's becoming more common now with, I think, with Zoom. Members vote publicly as their names are called, and it is common in government organizations, particularly if there is money involved. You know, they're allocating funding to something, or they're spending money on a construction project or something, that you want to have a roll call. You want everybody to be, what's the word, recognized, I guess, for what it is they are, which side they are voting on. There are mail-in ballots. Usually that involves secrecy. It can be an organization like an HOA, for instance, that are trying to amend their bylaws or elect officers or something like that. They're sent by mail to the entire membership because that's what it says to do in your bylaws. And then the membership is supposed to return the ballot to the secretary or to whomever. And that's common. Got a fun fact for you. Minnesota now allows HOAs to count any ballots that are not returned from a mail-in ballot as affirmative votes. And that's huge. If you belong to an HOA, you know how hard it is to get people to return ballots in the first place. And if you want to get 2/3, or I know one organization has 75% is what they need in order to amend their bylaws, you know, that's just not possible. People just don't respond that well. And that used to be that everything would fail because if you didn't return it, then they were voting no. Well, the legislature has made this, I think it's a year, maybe 2 years, that you can, that HOAs, and this is, I think, just HOAs, can count their ballots as that are not returned as affirmative, with the thought being that if people are against us, they have an opportunity by sending in their ballot and saying no to tell you that they're against it. But if they seem to be okay with it, then that's how that goes. So that's a big deal. Now, I'm not an attorney, so I may have some little thing wrong in here, and there may be other stipulations involved, but just so you know, if you're in an HOA yourself, you might want to check that out. And of course, preferential or ranked choice voting, which we just saw recently in the election last month. St. Paul, Minneapolis has it. I think Bloomington does. I don't know who else. It's for when you require a majority, which is always a good idea, and there are more than 2 candidates for an office. Voters will rank a certain number of candidates, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And my visual is that this is done by hand. I don't know. They may have a computer program lined up to do this, but as I recall, one of the results from St. Paul was delayed a day or two while they did this. So I'm guessing that's might be doing it by hand. But at any rate, the visual is that if you are ranked number 1, if you have, let's say we have 4 candidates, A, B, C, and D, and if they are put into piles according to what the number ones are. So if candidate A's ballots for people voted for them as number 1, they get put in a pile. People that voted for candidate B for their number 1 choice would go into another pile, and so on. So you'd have 4 piles of all the people that get number 1s. If you would count each pile then and figure out if anybody got majority. And by the way, that does generate a teller's report right there. You're going to have a series of teller's reports in a preferential voting. So in the first iteration, the first count, you would say candidate A got this many number 1s, candidate B got this many, and so on. No one received a majority. So then you take the smallest pile and you look at what got ranked number 2 on those ballots. And that candidate has now kind of disappeared from the landscape. But now you take those ballots and look at the number 2s and distribute them onto the remaining piles. And then you count again, another teller's report. of how many were in this pile now and how many in that pile, and so on, all the way down. And I think that's what they did in St. Paul. I think it just took that second choice of that last pile to make the decision, and somebody ended up with a majority in that case. And they just keep doing it until they run out. The specifics I'm not real clear on. I don't know what pile they take next and exactly how they do it, but that's how they get it started anyway. And I need water. But it's a really good way to make sure that you get the choice that most people are happy with. It is the best way to do that without having to do a runoff election, which is very time consuming and very expensive. So this is a good thing to do. It just takes a while. Okay, then I want to spend just a little bit of time on electronic meetings, which of course is what we're in and what you are run on. Many states now, since the pandemic, allow electronic meetings, even if your bylaws don't mention them at all. But it is a good idea to amend your bylaws if you need to make sure that electronic meetings are authorized. And I'm sorry, I did not go look at yours after, when I was working on this. I didn't. And this has been an issue during the pandemic for a lot of my clients, that they wanted to know if they could do it this way, if they could do it that way, and some needed to have a little parking lot meeting. my study group, my parliamentary study group that I go to every month, wanted to authorize, we wanted to do it right. So we called a meeting and actually physically held it in a parking lot so we could be outside during the pandemic. We brought our own lawn chairs and did what needed to be done to amend our bylaws so that we could have an electronic meeting. And of course, we're loving it. Now, the thing about Roberts and electronic meetings, and this probably is a legal issue too, because I think there are statutes about this. All participants must be able to hear each other at the same time in order to consider it as a valid meeting. They don't have to see it. Zoom is nice in that you can see each other, but it's the hearing that's important. Remember the good old telephone conference calls we used to do? That would be something that could be called as a valid meeting, because everybody can hear each other, provided not everybody is talking at the same time, which seemed to be a problem with the conference calls I was on. But anyhow, it's the hearing that's important in real time, which means that things like emails don't cut it. Emails don't make a meeting. So, and as you set up your electronic meeting, and you probably have this all in place already, it's good to have rules written down if you can. Otherwise, you'll be dealing with what we would call customs. And how do people manage, and how do people interact, and how do people get their voices be heard in an electronic meeting? So you need rules for telling people how they can get recognition from the chair, how they can obtain the floor, how they can submit motions in writing. How does the chair or the secretary determine the presence of a quorum? And how do you take and verify votes? Those are things that get real fuzzy. Most of the things that I told you about the common ways of doing voting presumes in person. Now, some of them are adaptable for electronic meetings, but others are not. So how do you do it to make it fair? Also, you want to remind people and make it a rule that they should mute their microphone when they're not speaking, so you don't get those feedback issues. You need to remind people that they are responsible for their own technology. If they lose connection in the middle of a vote, it's a shame, but the group is not going to retake that vote just because somebody dropped off. It's not feasible. And of course, you need to avoid abuses with the chat feature. I have very mixed feelings about chat. I love it for what we're doing today as far as putting in questions, but it can be a nuisance if you're a presenter or if you're doing something where the chat is open and people are using it to chit chat. My background, of course, is as a classroom teacher. I didn't teach in the classroom very long, but that's how I started. And to me, it's like sending written notes to each other. You know, it's sending notes in class, and it irritates me. But then, you know, what can you do? So you have to be careful that the chat is not used for debate. It should not be taking over as a shadow meeting. The meeting should be what's on Zoom and what people can hear. It should not be all these other little questions and things. Debate, as a rule, needs to go through the chair. This is what we talked about before, that debate needs to go through the chair. The chair is the director of traffic, so to speak, and it keeps things from getting chaotic. We have the rule that a member may debate only twice on the same motion on the same day. Well, in the chat, that is just not, you know, people just don't pay attention to that. So we get a lot of etiquette breaches and people asking questions of each other and the wrong person answering a question. I mean, it's just can be a mess, and you probably have noticed that. So I want to ask you, what do you think is the best way to vote in electronic meetings? I can give you a couple suggestions, but what do you find in your organization works the best?
I like the actual hand raising feature that you can use on Zoom.
Okay, the icon?
A little digital hand is raised.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I would like that too. I mean, I think that is a good one. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Zoom has done a better job with it. Originally, the icon only stayed on for a couple seconds, as I recall, and then it disappeared. So if you were trying to track how many people were voting in favor, it was gone. So they fixed that. I mean, Zoom has been just really interesting. Okay, so that works well for you. Yeah. Okay, that would be one of the things I would recommend. So the show of hands is what that is. And no matter the size of the group, doesn't so much matter in this situation where you are online, because you can just kind of scroll down and see very easily. So good, I would agree with you on that one. Do you ever use roll call?
We never do.
Yeah, how many people generally come to your meetings?
Oh, we have a variety of meeting sizes, but you know, usually it's around a couple dozen.
I'm sorry, how many?
Usually around a couple dozen.
Couple dozen. Okay. Yeah. So that's, that would be doable for roll call, but maybe you don't have anything that is that maybe serious that you have to have a roll call, that you have to record what everybody who voted how. Yeah. Like I said before, I have some government kinds of clients, and whenever they're doing allocations of funding, they need to do roll call. And so since they're so used to roll call and their group is not huge, it's like 20, they do roll call a lot. But for the average group, it would not be essential. Oh, good. And do you ever use the Zoom polls or ballots from other groups? Yeah, those work well, and they're getting better too. I think that Zoom has improved those over the last couple of years. So yeah, to my mind, these are probably the three that are the most efficient and most useful and helpful for electronic meetings. But I'm sure we will not run out of in-person meetings that we have to attend, or we get to attend, are privileged to attend. So I think we will have those, have the need to know these other things as well.
We have a couple comments in the chat.
Okay,
Elizabeth Hoffman mentioned that she likes the poll feature for less formal meetings, and added that they have to use roll call for some votes.
okay.
Ann Walker Smalley wrote that multi-types did a roll call when the group was deciding on a fiscal agent for the $1 million appropriation and the approval of plans for phase one.
Mhm. Yes, those would be examples of serious votes. So good. Yes, thank you for your comments, because yes, those are, if I didn't say it at the beginning, I should say it now, that the vote that you use, the method of voting that you use, depends on your circumstance and depends on what it is you're actually voting on. And the more serious ones, the ones that take longer to do, are sometimes the most accurate, and maybe, would be what you would want to use for your serious things. So sounds like you've got a good handle on that. So good. Thank you for those comments. Okay. Well, I want to close with some basics of Roberts that I hope you have been noticing as we've gone along. I know sometimes I start a presentation with the basics of Roberts, but I thought this time I'm going to end to see that, to kind of tie it together for you a little bit. As you may have noticed, that Roberts promotes democracy, promotes the kindness and treating other people the way you would like to be treated, the golden rule. So it is a very good system, I feel, and a lot of people feel, for getting decisions made in a peaceful, kind manner. Sometimes people cringe when they think they've got rules to think about or rules to be under, but the Roberts rules, and I think many of the rules in society actually, are made to treat everyone equally and to be as fair as possible, so that the big guy doesn't run over the little guy. All members have rights and responsibilities toward their organization. We have one person, one vote. Even if you're a brand new member, you get the same vote as somebody who's been in the organization a long time. One person, one vote. Even if someone is an officer or committee chair or whatever, their vote isn't any heavier, any more weighted than yours. It's still one person, one vote. Decisions are made by the majority, not by that person who talks the longest and the loudest and twists everybody's arm. We consider one thing at a time so that there isn't chaos, so that we can kind of focus and keep our mind on one thing that we decide and then go on to something else. Debate is civil. We treat each other with as much kindness as possible. It is focused because we are just considering one thing at a time. And it is somewhat limited. You can only vote or speak twice on the same motion on the same day, somewhat limited, so that everybody has a chance to participate. And we're fortunate to have a wonderful chair who will enforce the rules for us, direct traffic, and keep us going the right way. All right. Now I wanted to list a couple of references for you. Of course, I've been using Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, 12th edition, the big book. And then the little book, same title, but in brief. And that's only the 3rd edition. They have not been putting that out forever and ever. And for this one, I also, a friend gave me this book, and it's really helpful. And it's very much like the Roberts in brief, but it's done by someone else. It's called Fast Track Robert's Rules of Order by Jim Slaughter. And I know who Jim Slaughter is. I mean, he doesn't know me, but I know him. He's one of the famous people in the National Association of Parliamentarians. Excuse me, I need a drink. Thank you. That he's an attorney. He's a very prominent member of our group, and he writes prolifically and well and easily. It's easy to understand. So if you come across an article by Jim Slaughter, read it. It'll be worthwhile. Okay, I'm going to finish this and then I'll come back to you, Zach. Two websites for you. The first one is parliamentarians.org, and that's the National Association of Parliamentarians. A lot of good information on there. Also, they have a store if you want to buy anything. robertsrules.com is kind of the Robert family business. Also a good place. There are a lot of forums, fora, is that the plural? I've forgotten my Latin, for discussions about, what about this rule? What about that rule? What do you do in this situation? What do you do in that situation? So these two both are very good websites if you just want to play around with it and look up things. So I offer you all of these. Okay, Zach, what do you got?
First of all, if there's any word that should follow Latin rules, I think forum is it. But Ann Walker Smalley asks a question that sort of shows that I think you've done your job, Pat, because she's asking, how does one become a parliamentarian?
Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, you go to parliamentarians.org. You go to that first website there. They will give you all the information you need. In a nutshell, you do your self-study. You take the Roberts in brief and you learn what is in that book, that material, and then that will be the basis of a test. And there's a membership test in order to be, to join. You do need to pass the membership test. And that just, that gets you in the door, that gets you access to, discounts at the store, but also you'll see opportunities and for enrichment in a lot of different areas. And then you can work your way up the ladder as far as becoming a registered parliamentarian or becoming the next step, a professional registered parliamentarian, which is what I am. And we're in the process of changing how that happens. They're going from one kind of format to a different kind of format, but it's very interesting process. And if you get to be a PRP, a professional registered, you have a 6-year term and then you need to renew. So they're very good and they very much stress continuing education. So they're going from coursework to CEUs now. And there are a lot of opportunities for them, a lot of things you can do online. And you are most welcome to join my group. I'm a member of it. It's not my group. It's called the St. Paul Unit. We meet online on the third Monday morning of every month, except February, because February we all like to go south. But if you're interested in doing a study, and if you're free on Monday mornings, please join us and you can see me for more details on that. But taking the test is the first step in becoming a member, and you get to call yourself a parliamentarian, small p probably. But we welcome new members all the time, and we're always interested in spreading the word, because we all have to go to meetings at one point or another. And it's good to know what's going on and know how you as a member can participate fully in that. So thank you for that question. And I did not plant it. Okay, one more minute, it looks like. I hope you're not shattered that I didn't come up with a quiz for this one, but I just had so much information I couldn't put a quiz in there. So I hope you're not disappointed.
Not at all. And I want to thank you for the time that you've spent with us, Pat. I think it was excellent. I learned so much. I hope everybody else learned as much as I did. And please look to your email inbox for a recap of the 4 sessions. along with an evaluation form. And we definitely value your feedback on these sessions.
Yes, please, please. Well, I have a thank you to you too. I've enjoyed this thoroughly and I appreciate your taking time to listen to me. So I hope to see you again sometime. So thank you.
Pleasure.